Next on Guest Access TV, Channel 2, Creepshare, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark episode special. Then find out Angela's pregnancy test results and the shocking season finale of Hot Dog Trophy Wives Raw. Later, on an all-new episode of Tank Top Detective Myrtle Beach, Carlos has had it up to here with Julia, and he puts his hands on her for the last time. Guest Access TV, Channel 2.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a series of children's books written by Alvin Schwartz and illustrated by Stephen Gamble. This series consists of 3 different titles: Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. Each volume in the series is a collection of short scary stories for children that draw heavily from old urban legends and folklore, with there being a total of 82 different stories, 29 in the first book, 28 in the second, and 25 in the third and final book. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, these books were quite popular, but they were also the subject to much controversy in school libraries across the country, being deemed by some parents as satanic for the often disturbing, sometimes violent content within the stories and the frightening artwork that accompanies them. All 3 Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books are listed by the American Library Association as being the most challenged series of books from 1990 to 1999 and the 7th most challenged from 2000 to 2009. To celebrate the book's 30th anniversary in 2011, HarperCollins re-released all 3 Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, but these re-released editions featured new artwork by Brett Hellquist that replaced the original artwork by Stephen Gamble. This decision to re-release the series with new artwork was poorly received by both old fans and new fans alike, citing that the new toned-down artwork wasn't nearly as scary or effective as the originals. A counterpoint often made to those in favor of the new artwork is that if a child cannot handle the disturbing imagery, then they shouldn't be able to handle the disturbing stories. Due to the poor reception of the books re-released in 2011, since then, all 3 individual books, a box set containing all 3 books, and a compilation book featuring all 3 books in one have been re-released, again now featuring the original artwork by Stephen Gamble. In 2013, it was announced that a film adaptation of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was a potential feature film and that CBS Films had secured the rights to make one. Over the past few years, there's been a handful of updates, but mostly just concerning producer and writer changes. On April 29th, 2018, Guillermo del Toro was announced as the film's co-writer, and that Andre Orvadal, director of 2016's The Autopsy of Jane Doe, would be directing. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is set to start filming this summer 2018. The top 12 scariest scary stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Number 12, The Big Toe. The Big Toe is a scary story for kids and the very first story to appear in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It is a well-known jump story derived from another widely recognized jump story called The Golden Arm. The Big Toe is about a young boy who unearths a mysterious big toe from his garden and then has his father cut it into 3 pieces to put in a soup for supper, like his mother suggests to him. That night, the toe is knowingly eaten between the young boy, his mother, and father, and when he tries to go to bed, he is woken up in the middle of the night by something out in the street that is wailing, "Where is my toe?" The painful wailing becomes louder and louder as the very likely previous owner of the toe comes inside and moves through the house, getting closer and closer to the young boy's bedroom. Rinse, wash, and repeat, "Where is my toe?" a few more times until the toe man finally enters the bedroom and shouts the bold accusation,
"You've got it!"
very loudly at the boy, bringing the story to an end. However, unlike most other stories in this series, there is actually another ending to the big toe. When the boy hears the voice still crying out for its missing toe, he hears it coming from the chimney instead. It's revealed in this alternate ending that it is some kind of a strange creature coming to repossess the stolen big toe as the boy sees one up inside the chimney staring back down at him. Very similar to the story of Little Red Riding Hood, the boy actually talks to the strange toe creature in the chimney, asking it questions like, "What you got such big eyes for?" and "What you got such big claws for?" etc. This strange creature responds appropriately to these questions, and when asked what you got such sharp teeth for, the story ends with the creature shouting,
"To chomp your bones!"
This story is best if being told around a campfire or in a group-like setting with at least a few people there present. The big toe is supposed to be a jump story, which is pretty self-explanatory, so the person telling the story needs to pounce on or grab at someone close to them while giving that last line, "You've got it," for the full jump story, or rather jump scare effect. The storyteller's delivery here can make it or break it where this one's concerned. There couldn't be a better way to start off this list, as it's not only a good scary story, but it's also a very memorable one because it is the very first story from the very first book. The big toe has always kind of preyed on that fear of lying awake inside your own bed, in the security of your bedroom, inside your family's home, hiding underneath the covers all alone, believing you should probably be safe, but there's something horrible that actually knows exactly where you are and is literally coming right for you right now. Number 11, The Hook. The Hook is a scary story for children based on the popular urban legend from the 1950s, The Hook Man, and is the 20th entry to appear in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book. The Hook is about a couple hearing on their car's radio while parked on a hill outside of town together that a murderer has escaped from the nearby state prison and is currently heading south on foot. The fugitive is said to be armed with a knife, and in place of his missing left hand, he is wearing a hook. The girl in this story, Sarah, wants to leave immediately and go home, while the boy in this story, Donald, does not. After Sarah finally does convince Donald to take her home, she thinks she hears scratching at her door, and Donald doesn't seem to believe her, but when he goes to let Sarah out at her house, on the other side of the car, hanging from the door handle, there was a hook. This spooky Lover's Lane story is amongst one of the most well-known of the bunch, and is a true campfire tale classic. Like previously mentioned, The Hook is inspired by a popular urban legend from the 50s about a killer with a hook for a hand that attacks a couple in their car. The original Hookman story gained significant attention in 1960 when it was reprinted in the advice column Dear Abby. Since then, it has become a morality archetype on youth sexuality in popular culture and has been referenced in many slasher horror movies. In the 2014 American documentary film Killer Legends, filmmaker Joshua Zeman and special researcher Rachel Mills investigate the source of several widespread urban legends, including this one. The duo traced the Hook/Hookman urban legend to the 1946 Texarkana Moonlight Murders, the horrific unsolved crime that served as the basis for the early slasher film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Although the real-life events from 1946 and those portrayed in the film don't feature a killer with a hook for a hand, they both have a serial killer that does prey upon unsuspecting teenagers parked at a lover's lane. Number 10, The Babysitter. The Babysitter is a scary story for kids and the 23rd story to appear in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book. While a young girl named Doreen is babysitting some children, she starts receiving some very alarming phone calls. After speaking to an operator, Doreen finds out that the creepy caller is now a home invader. When the operator traces the calls Doreen has been receiving throughout the night, they're traced back to another telephone that's actually upstairs inside the house she's babysitting at. After the operator tells Doreen to leave and gets the police, a strange man with a suspicious smile on his face starts down the stairs and coming towards the children. They all run out of the house with Doreen, where they meet up with the police, who go inside and arrest the man. This very scary story is probably a babysitter's worst nightmare come true, and was all too possible at one time for actually happening in real life many years ago. Obviously, due to significant advances in telephone and communication technologies over time, this particular situation is likely to never actually happen again. Although technological advancements do create a dilemma where this story is concerned, making it seem dated and not as creepy anymore, it's still well conceived. The Babysitter story has been the inspiration for several horror movies, including When a Stranger Calls and the Scream series. Number 9, The Red Spot. The Red Spot is a scary story for kids and the 17th story to appear in the series' third and final book, Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. The Red Spot is one of the shorter stories from the series, but it's also one of the scariest, with its subtle nods to the body horror genre and traumatizing artwork that accompanies it. This page-long nightmare is about a young girl who wakes up one morning and discovers a strange red spot. And no, this isn't about that kind of red spot either, but rather a strange red spot on her face, as in a strange blemish. You see, the night before, this young girl felt something crawl across her face, and the next morning, her mother says that the strange red spot looks like a spider bite, telling her not to touch it. The red spot eventually turns into a red boil, before finally bursting open while the girl is taking a warm bath, unleashing a brood of tiny little spiderlings from where the mama spider laid her eggs inside the girl's cheek. This entry in the Scary Stories catalog is a great example of just how well the writings of Alvin Schwartz paired with Stephen Gammell's horrifying artwork, making every frightened child question, can spiders really lay eggs in our skin? Could they really lay eggs in my face while I'm sleeping? At the time, this seemed to be the only thing worse than swallowing spiders in your sleep. Number 8, No Thanks. No Thanks is a short, scary story for kids, and the 18th story to appear in Scary Stories 3 that's based on a report from the New York Times, March 2nd, 1983, about a guy named Jim and his super sketchy encounter in the parking lot late one night after getting off work. A man steps out of the shadows, approaching Jim by saying, "Hey, mister," in a low voice while holding out his right hand that is balancing a blade on the palm of it. The man tells Jim it's a nice sharp knife a couple of times and that it cuts nice and easy. While Jim is telling himself not to panic, the man tells him that the knife is $3 or he can get 2 of them for $5 and that it would make a great present for his mama. Jim tells the man no thanks, stating that his mother already has one, and then bolts for his car. This story scared the shit out of me as a kid, and staring into the eyes of that disfigured little man from the story's artwork just made everything that much more hellish of an experience for me personally. I'm pretty sure that No Thanks is the first true Let's Not Meet story ever written, or at least a good early example of one. Number 7, High Beams. High Beams is a scary story for kids and the 22nd story to appear in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book, kind of similar in a way to that of The Hook. This story is also another product of a widespread urban legend and features one of the most shocking twist endings in the entire series. High Beams concerns a young woman driving home one night while being followed by a truck that continuously flashes its high beams from behind, flooding her car with blinding light, tailing close behind her the whole way home, taking every turn down every road. It does seem, though, as if the driver in the truck behind her is the real threat here, when actually the real threat is in the young woman's back seat, as the truck driver illuminates the inside of her vehicle, trying to expose what danger is lurking in the darkness and shadows behind her. I'm pretty sure my jaw quite literally dropped when I first heard the ending to this story as a child, and now as an adult, it's impossible for me to not look over my shoulder into the back of the car anytime another driver behind me flashes their brights. Number 6, The Thing. The Thing is a short, scary story for kids and appears in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book, having absolutely no connection to and not to be confused with the John Carpenter film of the same name, The Thing. This story is based on a Nova Scotian folktale from a book called Blue-Nosed Ghost by Canadian folklorist Helen Creighton. The Thing is the 7th story in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and is about 2 young men that see something dreadful coming out of a cornfield across the road from where they're hanging out at together. Going back to Helen Creighton's Blue-Nosed Ghost, the inspiration for this tale, it's safe to say that the thing the young men see coming out of the cornfield is called a forerunner, according to the first chapter of Creighton's book that's completely dedicated to forerunners. It explains that forerunners are supernatural signs that warn people of impending deaths. After bewilderment gets the best of one of the young men and he touches the thing to know if it's real or not, he dies about a year later looking just like the thing. I guess the old saying, curiosity killed the cat, is appropriate too where this story is concerned. Number 5, Dottie Walker. Dottie Walker is the 4th story in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book and is based on an old traditional tale from American folklore. The story concerns a young man and his dog spending the night in a haunted house together after a rich man offers him a large sum of money to do so. This haunted house has a sinister reputation amongst the locals in the area, and the young man agrees to stay inside it overnight for the money, but only under one condition, only if he can take his dog in there with him. Initially, upon entering the house and getting settled in for the night, everything seems to be going just fine, but sooner rather than later on in the night, an eerie voice is heard moaning off in the distance, Dottie Walker. Following the headless voice, much to the young man's surprise, his dog, who's never spoken a word in all of its canine life, makes a startling vocalization in response. Linchi, Kenchi, Kali, Mali, Dingo, Dingo. This bizarre dialogue between the disembodied voice and dog continues, really starting to scare the young man now as it's getting louder and louder, because he knows whatever it is, it's only getting closer and closer. The source of the voice eventually makes its way into the house, a bloody severed head coming out from the chimney and right into the main room, rolling out from the fireplace where the young man is with his dog, just as he had feared. Dottie Walker is a very scary story for children, and it's still a pretty scary story even as an adult on its own. The key to this one is the delivery, how the story is being told. The actual storytelling element here is crucial, and it's similar in that way to The Big Toe being a jump story. It's also similar to The Big Toe 2 in the way that it preys on that fear of hearing something coming for you and not wanting it to know where you are. What makes Dottie Walker differ, though, is that it has the addition of a pet dog, which adds an element of a false sense of security in this case, because instead of protecting the young man, man's best friend chooses to signal the unwanted company and invite it over to hang out. The original recording of Dottie Walker, read by George S. Irving from the official Scary Stories audiobook, is truly excellent, one of the very best, and is a highly recommended way of experiencing the story. A link to this recording will be included down below in the description. Number 4, May I Carry Your Basket? May I Carry Your Basket is the 19th story in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book, and the second on our list of stories to feature a severed head. This is a scary story for children that's based on an old British folktale called The Headless Woman, and is about a young man's walk home late one night when he spots an old woman that's walking and carrying a large basket. Politely, he asks the old woman if he can carry the basket for her, and she hides her face from him, but she does hand him the basket to carry. After she hands him the basket, a severed head pops up from the basket, her severed head, and then, dropping the basket onto the ground, the young man takes off running. The headless old woman chases behind him with the basket, and the head pops out again, but this time, the head launches itself at him and sinks its teeth into the back of one of his legs. The young man continues to run home in excruciating pain, but as he starts slowing down, the head pops up once more, biting him again, sinking its teeth into the back of his other leg. It's at this time when the young man looks up and behind him, only to see that the headless old woman with her head in the basket is gone. May I Carry Your Basket helped teach old fans of the Scary Story series as kids to never judge a book by its cover, because most seem to find this particular story's illustration to be one of their least favorite artworks in the books, yet the actual story itself was amongst one of the scariest and an all-time fan favorite from the series. There's just something that's really fucked up and disturbing about being chased by a floating, biting head. It doesn't seem right. Number 3, The Window. The Window is a scary story for kids from More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and is actually the first story to appear on our list from the second book in the series. The Window is based on a tale called Crogland Grange from the Story of My Life by Augustus Hare, and is about a young lady's vampiric encounter late one summer night during her stay at a cabin with her 2 brothers. Unable to comfortably fall asleep due to the warm summer temperatures, the young woman finds herself zoned out and just staring into the bedroom window that oversees an old graveyard on a hill. Before long, 2 small yellow and greenish colored lights appear off in the distance, making their way down the hill, through the graveyard, and right on over to her window. Approaching the glass, the lights appear to be the glowing eyes of some type of unknown creature with a shrunken, mummified, corpse-like face. If you didn't think this sounded scary enough already, then maybe you will when you find out that this creature reaches its arm inside the window so it can unlock it to crawl inside and attack the young woman by sinking its teeth into her throat. After the creature bites the young woman in her neck, it makes an exit through the broken window and disappears into the summer night. The next time the creature shows up at the cabin, the young woman's two brothers chase it out into the night, this time with guns blazing, firing a bullet into one of its legs as it escapes into an old burial vault that's in the graveyard. When the three of them go investigate the crypt, only one coffin is undisturbed, and it is that one of this vampire with the bullet in one of its legs. That image of a graveyard on a hill with something coming out of it and right up to the window late at night is absolutely terrifying. There's something about the creature unlocking the window too that just makes everything even scarier. Number 2, the drum. The Drum is a scary story for kids from the second book in the series, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That's also an alternate version of the story, The New Mother by Lucy Clifford, and is also based on an old folk tale called The Pear Drum. The Drum is an eerie tale about two sisters who were promised by a gypsy to be rewarded for behaving badly around their mother. The reward in this case being a percussion musical instrument, a drum, like the title of the story suggests. The drum in this story is not your average drum, however, this particular drum is described as when being played by the gypsy girl, a mechanical couple comes out from the drum and begins to dance. The uniqueness of this drum makes the two sisters very envious of the gypsy girl, possessing them both to start the begging process and even further to act on whatever the gypsy asks of them to do in order to get the extraordinary drum from her. The girls are asked to misbehave at home for their mother, and they do, but when they go check in with the gypsy the next day, they are told to misbehave at home again and be on their absolute worst behavior for their mother if they really want the drum. The sisters act even uglier this time, upsetting their mother even further, who tells them this time that if they keep acting like this, she will leave home with their baby brother for good, and they will get a new mother, one with 2 glass eyes and a wooden tail. When the girls tell the gypsy how bad they've been again, she doesn't give them the drum as anticipated and tells them that they need to be much worse. The girls press their luck and continue to be horrible at home for their mother, only to find out that the gypsy never planned on giving them the drum. After the 2 girls rush back home, they find out that their mother is gone, along with their baby brother, but they're not all alone. Their new mother is home, the one they were worried about, with her glass eyes glistening and her wooden tail thumping on the floor. This is pure nightmare fuel and easily agreed upon universally by fans as being one of the scariest stories in the entire series. For me personally, I enjoyed this story when I was still really young, but as I got older, it definitely grew on me, becoming scarier and scarier every time I went back to it. It most certainly has a don't make a deal with and or sell your soul to the devil kind of feel to it, reminding me a bit of Stephen King's Needful Things. What really gets me though, and I believe gets just about everyone who's familiar with this story, is the new mother with the glistening glass eyes and the wooden tail that's thumping on the floor. I can't quite imagine it or put a cohesive picture together in my head of what the new mother is supposed to look like, but I'm almost thinking something close to what I've seen for how Candle Cove is depicted. Something too like Eeyore's tail from Winnie the Pooh maybe. I don't know, but it just sounds really fucked up. A new mom who's got glass eyes and a wooden tail. That should be enough to scare any kids straight, but like I was saying, this got scarier to me when I was older, and even now as an adult, it's hard for me to imagine just how that looks exactly. And it didn't help much, that the illustration for the drum didn't feature the new mother in it either. Number 1, Herald. If you came into this video with any pre-existing knowledge pertaining to these 3 books, then it should be absolutely no surprise to you that this would be our number 1 pick. We wanted our list to be as unique as possible and stand out from all the other ones on the internet, but there was no avoiding this story being number 1. Herald is a scary story for children, and the 3rd one from the final book in this series, Scary Stories 3, to make it onto our list. When the weather gets too warm in the valley, 2 farmers named Thomas and Alfred would take their cows up to a green pasture where there were cooler temperatures. Thomas and Alfred would stay up there together in a small hut for the next couple of months. Life up there was pretty boring for the 2 farmers, so in order to pass the time, they decide it would be fun to make a doll the size of a man and put it out there in their garden to use like a scarecrow. Their life-size doll was made in the image of another farmer the 2 of them hated, named Herald. Throughout the days to come, Thomas and Alfred both entertained themselves by cursing and throwing their food at Herald. One night, after wiping food on Herald's face, the 2 farmers swear that they heard the doll making a grunting sound. Thomas suggests that it's probably a good idea to throw the doll into a fire, but Alfred thinks it's best if they just leave the doll alone. They ignore Herald for a while, but then decide one day that they're both probably just imagining the grunting sounds the doll is making, and they go back to being disrespectful to it again. One night, the farmers notice that Herald looks like he is actually growing, but they brush it off, stating that they've just been up at this pasture for way too long. The next morning, Herald just stands up, walks right out of the hut, climbs up on top of the roof, and trots around like a horse standing on its hind legs. Herald trots up and down the roof like this all day and all night. When Herald finally does stop, he climbs down from the roof, walks to a very far corner of the pasture, and just stands there watching everything. Thomas and Alfred were definitely scared at this point. They didn't know what Herald was going to do next, and they didn't want to stick around to find out. They both agreed to take the cows back down to the valley that day and leave the pasture for good. When they did leave, Herald was nowhere to be seen, and after getting a couple of miles in the other direction, they realized that they left behind some expensive milking stools. Neither one of them wanted to go back there or replace the milking stools, so they drew straws to decide which one would have to go back, and it was Thomas. Alfred continued walking towards the valley, but when he came to a rise in the path, he turned around to check and see if he could see Thomas. He didn't see Thomas anywhere. However, Alfred did see Herald, who was up on top of the hut, kneel down and stretch out a bloody skin to dry in the sun.
Next on Guest Access Television Channel 2 is Hot Dog Trophy Wives Raw. The results are in on this shocking season finale. Then, on an all-new episode of Tank Top Detective Myrtle Beach, Julia takes off the ankle bracelet and Carlos has his hands full. Who will call the law tonight? later, it's Guest Access Television's Hearst Theater triple feature special. Staying up late is the easy part, but do you have the guts? We triple dog dare you to find out. These 3 scary movies are sure to have you going to bed in your parents' room, starting right out the gate with Don't Make Me Cut You. A group of college kids are attacked by a gang of Lumbee Indians while partying at a construction site, starring Max Locklear as Chief Blackfeet, followed by the sequel, Don't Make Me Cut You Again. Summer vacation turns summer devastation when a group of females on a road trip stop at a gas station to get tattoos, but end up getting abducted by a gang of coke-smoking Lumbee Indians, starring Waldo Collins Jr. as Chief Blackfeet. Last but most certainly not least, to conclude our broadcast of Hearst Theater tonight, is The Diaper That Dripped Blood, originally released in 1982 as The Abortionist in Italy, the controversial Italian splatter classic that made you wear a rubber every time since. Guest Access Television, channel